What's up, guys? So in today's video, I interview Cris Chico. Cris has been in the online education space since way back in the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007, all the way from the seminar business to creating courses and ebooks. And I actually went through one of his real estate programs 10 years ago, and that was my first launch pad to becoming financially free through real estate. Cris has made millions of dollars as an online coach, course creator, YouTuber over the better part of a decade and a half at this point. So I was really excited to sit down and pick his brain on what he's learned throughout all that time and what it took for him to be successful. And we covered a lot of really cool stuff in this episode. We talked about the difference between being a direct response marketer where you're selling programs right off an ad versus building a brand, like having a YouTube channel where you're building a bunch of goodwill, and which one is the best in the end. We talked about overcoming imposter syndrome if you're struggling to get a foothold and you don't feel worthy of being a coach, what to do about that. We talk about YouTube and all the pros and cons of that platform, and how Cris, when he gets leads off of his YouTube channel, which has close to 16,000 subscribers, they are super hot and basically ready to work with him and give him money and just join his programs immediately. I found the episode very educational and enlightening. I think you will too. So without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, guys? This is Brian Elwood, and I am super excited today because I have a special guest on the line who I'm going to interview and share how he succeeded in his online education business. The guest's name is Cris Chico, and he is the founder of the FlipAnywhere Academy. He's an expert on virtual wholesaling, which is essentially finding properties anywhere you want in the US, even from your computer, flipping contracts, making money. And I found Cris about a decade ago and used his system actually as my first kind of springboard into achieving financial freedom. Cris has gone on to build a massively successful education business. And I want to unpack his brain today. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Cris.
No problem. I'm excited. I mentioned to you that most of the time I talk about real estate. So it's nice and interesting to talk about another topic that's not real estate.
Yeah. So unpack your story a little bit in the education business. You've been doing this for a while, and I was looking at your website today and I had an epiphany. I was like, he's actually doing kind of the same thing that he was doing 10 years ago when I first found you and read your virtual wholesaling blueprint ebook and followed your system and started making money. So you've been really consistent with, staying in your niche and just going deep. And so I want to hear how the journey's been for you, and fill in any gaps in the story that you think are important.
Yeah, I wrote a couple of things down because one of the things that, in this education business, right? There's been so many times that you probably, probably thought to yourself, oh, I wonder what happened to that guy, or I wonder what happened to this person, right? Never to be seen again. And I've had the fortunate, I've been fortunate to have staying power. And I think that comes from a couple of different things. So I can share that with everybody here. I mean, my journey started, it was around 2006 when I was doing real estate, and I had that business running, and I had people that were working for me. So I had free time. And with the free time, I started to look at the internet. Back then was when, really the people, they started just at the genesis of people starting to sell the courses online, right? And so I started on that journey of, hey, I wonder how this all works. And I learned how to, back then, there weren't any other tools that are available now, like ClickFunnels and all that stuff. It was just like Dreamweaver, HTML, coding. It was really rudimentary. And so what happened is that so I had staff that I had trained, and I'm a fairly technical guy, and I'm also a tinkerer. So I knew how to record videos and find a way to put them online, etc. And so I had training that I had for my own internal staff people that were doing things for me. And so then I got an interest in teaching what I was doing to others. And I was trying to make a decision at that time, because back then the way to get information was to go and attend a seminar physically and buy a bunch of books and tapes and DVDs and all that stuff, right? But if you want to sell that stuff, you have to produce it and, you know, put it somewhere like a garage. And I was too cheap and I was too scared to do that. So I was like, and I was just trying to figure out a way. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could put this in a membership site. And I remember back then there was one shopping cart and a member, and nobody was doing like membership sites, but I was able to kind of put it together. I remember going to one of the real estate gurus, and I told him about my idea, and he's like, oh, that sounds like a horrible idea. Everybody wants books and tapes. Nobody's going to log into your membership area. And I was like, yeah, but I'm too cheap to try it the other way. So I went ahead and I published the course. And then at the beginning, the course was called Absentee Owner Profits. And one of the things that I learned early on, and my journey in terms of the genesis of this started maybe in terms of understanding marketing, is I learned from a guy named Dan Kennedy, who's considered an old school guy. So I bought his book called The Ultimate Sales Letter, and that's what allowed me to start like thinking from a direct response marketer and that sort of thing. And on the first product that I created was Absentee Owner Profits, but I realized that it needed a better wrapper, right? Because a lot of times, information many times is commoditized, and it's a wrapper that you put around that information that makes a difference, whether or not you're able to sell it well and be able to, and that wrapper could be the way it's presented. It could be the way that you articulate the value of that information. It could be that because it's your personality in the business, and so people love and resonate with you. And so that's the thing, right? And so then that's when I came up with a concept of virtual wholesaling, which was how to do deals virtually. And so I came up with that term, and that took off fairly quickly. I had a partnership at the time that I got hooked up with a guy, Chris Dago. Him and I are still friends, but I partnered up with him for a couple of years, and I was doing seminars in the worst place you could ever possibly do a seminar, which is in New Orleans. And every day after the first day of the seminar, we had to start an hour later to compensate for the people that were drunk all night the night before, right? So I was doing the seminar business, and it was interesting because just having an honest conversation, during that time, I became disinterested in real estate. So even though I had used the real estate, right, as the thing that made me money, and then eventually then transition into the info business, and I'm just being honest, some of the things that I struggle with is that I never was really somebody that was enthusiastic about real estate. Some people you talk to, they're like, oh my God, I live and breathe real estate. I go to the bathroom and I'm making love to my wife, and all I think about is the house that I'm going to buy, right? That wasn't me. It was just like, hey, it was the only thing, after trying multi-level marketing and selling all kinds of crap, that was the only thing that worked, right? And so I think there's been different changes, right? So I was doing the seminar business, and then eventually I exited that. We parted ways, and then transition. And I can get into each of these individually, but just big picture, I was doing the seminar business, and then I didn't really want to do the seminar business anymore. So then for a period of years, I transitioned into selling just strictly courses, right? Was never doing any coaching. And part of the reason why, like we talked about this a couple of times, is changing your business to be to fit your personality. And I'm someone that I don't like being on the phone. I don't like answering questions, which is not very conducive to coaching, right? Because people pay you to answer your questions. And so if you don't want to answer questions, that's a problem. And so, and then I partnered up with Gary Boomershine, which with REI Vault. We created that, ran that for a couple of years. And, along the way that him and I separated, it was interesting because in that business, the person that I was operating as before that was just kind of a solopreneur and just doing things on my own. But then in that business, as it grew, and it grew to, I think it grew to a couple, like 2.5 million or so. That business requires something different of me, which I struggled with, right? Instead of being the doer of the thing, I had to be the manager of the thing. And so, and so then I transitioned into now kind of the existing business, which is 2016, which is predominantly the majority of my money I've made selling courses, all right, and very detailed courses that show people how to do step by step. I've done some coaching, but it kind of comes in and out. And some of the things around that is that I don't like to be on the phone. And then also, doing coaching sales requires potentially hiring a sales team and everything else. And so those are some of the things that I struggle with. And I've also struggled with, as we all do. I think everybody getting into this business is a little bit of I think a little bit for some people, a lot for me is imposter syndrome, right? Whether or not you feel that, hey, you should be teaching, even though you have students that have tremendous success, but somehow you don't feel that, hey, you're not up to the part yet. And I just kind of covering all those things, and we can dig into them. I think going back to just because I don't want to lose the comment. I think that I've been in the business a long time. And so in the span of internet years, it's a long time, because if I started the info business in 2007 and now it's 2022, what is that? That's how many years is that? I'm bad
15?
with math. 15, yeah. And I think that's come because of two primary things. Number one is iterations on, the business always changes. And so your methodology for acquiring customers has to change. The products in the marketplace have a certain life, shelf life, again, depending on the niche you're in. And so that's a big thing is that I've been fortunate enough to transition, right? Because I was doing a lot of teaching people how to send out postcards in direct mail, and now I transitioned to online marketing. And then the other critical component of that is just having, I have a really good reputation in the industry, because at the end of the day, the desire is always to serve the customer well, right? And to make sure that they got what they paid for. And I always say that, when you're dealing with a customer, it's easy in our business to just see a credit card and just see a credit card transaction, and think nothing of it. It's just a number, but hey, their credit card transaction, in that transaction, there's all their goals and aspirations and their dreams and everything they want to accomplish in their life. And it's all in there, right? And so I think that taking the stance of that there's a certain level of responsibility that's required, that you have to take on, and some of the people in this education space don't do that, because it's more like a gunslinging. Some people are just, hey, gotta like go to the village, take as much money as you can, and when there's no more, then we just move on to the next town after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That. So and so then now I'm actually trying to figure out what I want to do next, because I'm in the real estate niche, and there's things that are holding me to the real estate niche because of the fact that I have a reputation that is really difficult to replicate, right? And so and I make good money in doing what I'm doing. I have great student results, but sometimes I struggle because it's not new, right? It's not new and exciting. But I recently was hearing a story about a guy who said that the guy was running like a really boring business, but he's like, yeah, but I make a lot of money, and so if I really want some excitement, I'll take the money that I make from my business and do something exciting with it. So that's kind of where I am. I don't know if that was really long-winded, but I just try to condense like 15 years into like a short period of time.
Yeah, I appreciate the summary there. And I want to unpack a little bit about what you're doing now. So what's like the customer journey that you have now? Do you sell a course right off of ads, or do you do lead magnets? Can you unpack like what your product suite is right now and how you're selling it?
Yeah, maybe I'll break that down into products. How do we get lead generation, right?
Yeah.
And maybe fulfillment. In terms of products, our main product, and although that might change a little bit here, and this is just an open discussion, my main product since 2016 has been a $997 course, right? And it's compartmentalized, meaning that there's components in that course that I can siphon off and then sell at a lower price. So that gives me the ability to do that. But predominantly it's a $997 course. Partly because also, and again, my skill sets, right? My skill sets is I can write a webinar, right? Meaning I can write a compelling, a converting webinar better than I can say a video sales letter. I know funnels. I know, how to craft a funnel, how to write copy and everything else. So that product lends itself to my strength on that. Recently, however, and we can get into this later, everybody, the 997 product, it's kind of like in a little bit, what seems like a little bit of purgatory, because either some people are going really high ticket and saying, take your 997, sell it for more money and provide help and support. And a lot of people in my niche are transitioning over to like really high tickets. And my thought process is, when everybody zigs, you zag. And so then what does that mean? What other quality products are available at the lower price points, right? From a customer acquisition standpoint. That also just to clarify, I think that when I look at the product suite, I also look at, now I'll go back to that. So I have the main course, and then right now we have recently launched a high ticket offer, which is a $7,500 offer, and that $7,500 offer is an implementation of the 997. So for those that say, you know what, I'm overwhelmed, I need help, then we sell that. And the hack that I got around, because we talked about me not wanting to get on the phone. So we did just a trial of that product just to test it and launch it and see how it does. So we ended up doing, about 300,000 of sales off of that. And we sold it through chat, through text messaging and Google Docs, just because I didn't want to get on the phone with nobody. So I probably left money on the table, so to speak, but it was just what I was willing to do, right? But also too, the product mix also, I think another decision point around the product mix has to be, where are you going to get your customers? So as the example, let's say that if you're getting your customers predominantly from Facebook, and now you're going to implement a webinar funnel, you have to take that in consideration of your budget, right? Because if I have a webinar product that's a 997 product and I'm looking to acquire customers through paid traffic on Facebook, then I need to spend a certain amount of money in order to at least have enough data to make a decision about conversions, etc. Tracking on Facebook is a little bit more difficult now than it used to be. So, you talk about a webinar, that's a really long sales cycle. And so those are like things you have to look at. One of the reasons why I was considering doing a lower ticket product is because then, the sales cycle is very short, like and the feedback mechanism, meaning like, hey, I spend $100 in ads and we got this number of customers. That's different than, say, if I got a 997 product and I'm testing different audiences, I might have to spend $5,000 just to get enough data to know like what it's working. So I think also too, when you're making the product decisions, I think you have to make it in a scope of a few things, right? There's the one of them has to be customer acquisition. Like, what are you going to use in order to gain customers, and how does that product fit into the whole ecosystem of that, so that way you can have a chance of making it a success for you. Does that make sense?
With the three, yeah, and I want to unpack some of the stuff you're saying, because this is good. So the 300K in sales that you made was from the $7,500 product, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you did it through chat, no phone calls.
Correct. They filled out an application, and then once they filled out an application, then we brought them in through another app called Close.com, which a lot of people use for managing sales teams, but it has a text messaging function. So then those people get a text message from someone on my staff, and just chat with them a little bit about, hey, where they're at, because they filled out the application, and then they would send them by chat a Google Doc that would just explain the summary of the program and give them an opportunity to say, yeah, I'm in. Some people would say, yes, I'm in. Other people would have some lingering questions. So those people would get on the phone with somebody on my staff. It wasn't a full-blown sales conversation. It's more like an explanation of just making sure, like, hey, is it what you're looking for, et cetera. And so that's that process. And again, I think that we left money on the table by doing that, from the standpoint of, a lot of times when it comes to, I think, my belief is that when it comes to high ticket sales, what you're doing in that conversation, provided you have the right customer and you have the right product and everything else, you really are just walking them through the decision and making them feel comfortable about the decision. Because the fact is, many times they believe that the value of your product, understand the value of it, but they're not comfortable themselves because of the fact that maybe they feel uncomfortable because they bought other programs before and they never follow through. So they have a lot of, so the salesperson, I think the key thing about the salesperson is helping them become comfortable with making the decision versus leaving them to make the decision on their own, right? And just for clarity's sake, like recently, I invested quite a bit of money in a couple of programs from Grant Cardone, And thinking back on those, had I been left to make the decision on my own, I probably wouldn't have joined, right? Because it was a big decision, et cetera, and they kind of walked me through the decision. So, that's why I say I left money on the table, because there were people that potentially could have joined, but they just needed a little bit more walking them through the decision.
Got it. And the other question I had about the 300K in sales, were those people who had already purchased the course for $997?
Yeah, for the most part, I would say 90% of those people were already people that purchased the product, right?
Okay.
And so they had already made that commitment, which is also part of the reason I'm considering the low ticket product, because if you think about it, the 997 is content. It's different content than, say, you would publish on YouTube, but it's still content. And so in a time of diminishing attention spans with people, how do you get them to pay attention? And you get them to pay. So in other words, if they see a free video on YouTube, they may not watch it, but if they spend a certain amount of money with you, then you know what? Even though it's a small amount relative, they'll go through it. So the 997, is a customer who's bought in, who believes. I call it points of the three things I always think about with any product that you're selling is that they have to believe that, hey, the first thing is this is a great opportunity. So that's number one. Number two, this guy is a guy or gal that's going to help me with it, right? So they have to believe that I'm the one to help them. And number three is they got to figure out that they can do it, right? The coaching eliminates the problem with them, right? Because, hey, we're going to handle so many other things and we're going to coach you along to remove all those obstacles. But the purchase of the product, solves those other two first things as the thing that the first two things that they need to get through.
Got it. Yeah. And so that clears it up for me, because I think if someone's a newbie and they're listening to this, they're like, he did 300K pointing people to a Google Doc, but what they may not understand is the amount of like goodwill and trust that was built up 100%. For you.
Yeah.
Maybe they watched 100 of your YouTube videos and then they finally bought that $997 course, and then now they're being specifically personally invited to the $7,500 program. And so
Correct.
That's a very different person, right, than someone cold off of an ad.
No, the thing I would say that if I would say the YouTube, and we can get into this as well, the YouTube makes a big difference, because many of them say on the application that, I watched so many of Chico's videos on YouTube. So then the YouTube is a relationship builder where they feel like they almost like they know me. And it's funny because sometimes it's a little weird because they'll mention things about like my mother-in-law, and I'm like, I forgot that she was in the video, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that video. So it's kind of like builds that relationship with people. So it's a combination of the product purchase and their relationship with me because of what they watch of me.
Got it. I've been in a lot of the different high ticket coaching programs, and they all teach you to basically just put people right to an application funnel, get on the phone and sell them something, $5,000 or $10,000.
Right.
But sometimes I watch someone like you who might have a lower price course, or I recently actually read Joe McCall's chapter in the Russell Brunson 30 Days book, where it's like, if you only had 30 days to succeed, what would you do? And Joe McCall was talking about putting together a mind map that he would sell for $7, and then he would have an upsell of the high ticket. So I've always kind of played in my mind with, is it smart to have something cheaper to help people take a more gentle step towards you versus just hitting them right with I got this $10,000 thing? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, I think a couple of things that I think about, and I've learned this, everybody in the info marketing space has their own religion. Right. And their religion is the only one that can send you to heaven. Right. and so what happens is the high ticket guys say, oh, you are so stupid. $997, you're never going to make this work. And so everybody has a pitch. Right. So that's one thing to consider. And the thing I think about is that I think about my own habits and my consumption habits, meaning that not every customer, like I'm very resistant to getting on strategy session calls because I know what's coming. Like I know, like I can see it a mile away. You're not going to get me in a strategy session. And so I look at it as the KOT. How do you build the KOT with the customer? If you build know, like, and trust, right? So because and if you think about it, in the nature of our business, the core of our business is building an audience of people that know, like, and trust us, and building that relationship. And then eventually we're going to ask if they need some help from us. And they're either going to say yes or no, right? So you're building up those relationship credits over time. And so there's different ways of building those relationship credits. One of them is obviously organic. Another way to build relationship credit is through paid traffic, right? Meaning that you're buying for somebody to come into your world. And then at that point, then what you're doing is really you're dealing, I think I look at that more as you're dealing in economics more so than the methodology, meaning like, hey, if you're going on Facebook and you're trying to, you're trying to make that work, what needs to be put in place in order for you to, acquire customers, even at break even, right? Which may not be what you want to do. Because I think about it as, and I was giving this advice to somebody today, is that, whenever you think about what you want to do in terms of a product, you also have to consider, like, you may want to create this product. You're like, oh, I want to create this amazing product that's going to be like $39 and it's going to be just amazing. It's going to be this and that. But then now you have to figure out, what are you going to do with that? Like, if you're going to decide that, hey, I'm going to go out and go to Facebook ads in order to get customers, you're going to really suffer, right? Unless you have a particular funnel in place in order to facilitate customer acquisitions. So I think that there's my feeling is, thinking about just going back to your question, know, like, and trust. I think there's not one thing. Number one, it's picking. I think that everybody should have a social media presence. You gotta pick which poison you want, right? Which one suits you. But I think of it as the minute, even for me, if I find somebody that I'm thinking I'm gonna buy something, what do? I search on Google, I see if I find them on YouTube, and I'm wanting to get a flavor of them. So I think having some sort of social media, I'm a big fan of YouTube for a variety of different reasons, and we can discuss that. I'm a big fan of YouTube. And then the other part of it is that figuring out, what the right product mix is for your business, right? High ticket is good when you've got an audience already, like when you're just trying to get initial traction, right? High ticket is good when you are trying to better understand your market and what they want and some of the pain points, because now you're having those conversations with them and you're really understanding them throughout the whole sales cycle, both from when you talk to them and you sell them, and then eventually they come on your program and they have success. So I think that high ticket is great for that, because a funnel is complicated. Nowadays, there's so many. I built a funnel the other day for using a sales seminar, and that was like a beast and a half to build. And so, so I don't know. I guess I'm saying is that there's no one way. I think it's a careful evaluation of what are the 2 or 3 things that you can do that fits the way you like to work, your customer avatar, and your business model, and focusing really hard on those, and then growing the treasure chest of money that you have. So then that way you can get others to come in and help you with those other things that may not be in your wheelhouse.
That's a good point. And, when I think to my own journey into different programs or different, when I had moments in my life where everything changed for me, a lot of them actually started with a book, which was $10, like reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or the 4-Hour Work Week, or I could go on and on. I would have, paid for Robert Kiyosaki's coaching program. He didn't have one, if it existed, after just reading a $10 book.
Right.
So that's interesting. I want to ask you, because you mentioned something about building up that relationship, know, like, trust. You reminded me of a quote I heard that Frank Kern say. It was something along the lines of, the amount of money you make in the education space is directly proportional to the amount of goodwill that you've built up, multiplied by the amount of offers that you make. And he was saying, every time you make an offer, you sort of tap that goodwill, and then you build more goodwill, and then you sort of extract, almost like you're planting a garden, and then it's, you got tomatoes everywhere, and you harvest it and they come back. Do you agree with that? And how do you think about, when to sort of like tap into your goodwill versus build up more?
Well, I think you should always, my feeling is that you should always be building up the goodwill. My thought process is that you don't have to go full tilt all the time. And by that, let me explain it. Let's say that, for example, that I have a list of people that I have an email list. And so if I'm running a promotion, right, for example, and I can legitimately, man, I can put this thing together. They're going to get 2 emails a day, 4 countdown emails, and all that stuff, right? And what happens is that you're going to burn that list, right? So that's going full tilt. I think what I do is look at it from the perspective of like I may not send as many emails for that promo, right? Because I may not try that hard to sell you because maybe you're not ready. And then, at the time you're ready, maybe we'll catch you on the next time we run the promo. So that's the thing that I look at. Because it's that whole principle is kind of like what Gary Vaynerchuk talked about, like the jab, jag, hook, meaning that, you're always providing value, and at some point you're going to do an ask. And so I think, I don't know if I have an answer other than that I try to provide value and then just not go full tilt all the time. Because you've been on those lists where you go on and get on somebody's list, and every single day is 3 emails sending you some crappy product that has no chance in working, and eventually you're just gonna like tap out because you can't be on that list anymore, right? So I think it's that's what I've done is just like, for example, another example could be that I have a lot of, in the real estate niche, a lot of people always hitting you up for JVs, like, oh man, I got this thing that will convert well, just send it to your list. And I look at that with a level of responsibility that, is it congruent with the direction that I'm sending people to? Number one, do I believe in the product? Do I know the person? And so sometimes I might say no to something because I just don't think it fits with what our messaging is. I'm not really sure if it's something that will work for them. And like for crypto, people telling me like, oh, you should promote this crypto offer. I got this great thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not doing crypto. And I'm not really sure, like, I'm going to take the time and energy to learn it. And so, like, for me to send people to a crypto offer when I have no idea what I was about, then it's a disservice. So I think that it's almost like as if like you're taking the people that you have in your universe under your wing, and you're looking after them, much like you would look after somebody else that was your friend.
Yeah, it's funny when I go out for beers with my buddies. We usually will like pick up each other's tabs. I got this round. I got this round. Right. And we never actually add up how much he owes me. But we talk about how we have sort of an unspoken like tab in the back of our mind. And it's almost like in the book Influence, Robert Cialdini, he talks about the reciprocity void that is created. If I give you $100 gift and you don't give me anything, there's a void, and you're eventually going to try to fill that void. Yeah. And it sounds like you have almost like a subconscious relationship with your audience and your email list where you're in touch with that, flow of give and take. And you're like, I've already promoted this other thing to them. This isn't right. So you're treating that relationship with respect. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And, with that, obviously there's opportunity loss, right, with revenue, because you could have gotten revenue by promoting this thing that everybody's hot and heavy about. But I think that also helps with longevity, right? Because again, I have a great reputation in the niche, and I think it's just being mindful of just doing well for others and taking their best interests at heart, which sometimes doesn't necessarily translate into money, right? You making the most amount of money possible.
Do you follow Alex Hormozy at all on YouTube?
I do, because I'm a study of, I'm kind of, I do for a couple of different reasons. Obviously his content is good, but I'm also looking at that from I'm a little bit stuck on YouTube, and I'm trying to get unstuck. And so I'm looking at him from the perspective of what is he doing right? Because he's recently had a tremendous amount of growth and built up a lot of goodwill. He recently had one of his videos, I don't know if you saw his last one, talked about the brand building versus direct response.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you about. So did you watch that video? And if
I did watch that video.
What are your thoughts on being a brand builder versus a direct response, marketer?
Yeah, I think conceptually, I think it's spot on. I think sometimes though you have to it just depends on, like he says, your time horizon. If you're in a situation where you may have to be more direct response driven in the beginning because you need sales to come in and you need to keep the lights on and you need to, and then little by little you transition over.
Mhm.
Like a good example of this is Grant Cardone. You know, back a couple of years ago, if you ever got one of those sales guys on the phone, you wanted to like, you know, go over there and pounce on them and you know, burn their office down because they were so aggressive and obnoxious and everything else. And he
Mhm.
talked about this, is that now the marketing is overtaking, where now people are warm, like they're calling and saying, oh, how do I, you know, what do you got? What do you have to buy? Because I'm interested. I want to know what you guys do. So I
Mhm.
think that that's a good example of him making that transition, right? But in the beginning, he was definitely hardcore sales. So I think it's I agree with what Hormozy said. I just think that's, you have to kind of like, sometimes you don't have the liberty of having a big war chest to be able to just do all brand building and allow that to build up over time, because you need to be able to do direct response in the beginning. But still,
Yeah.
even though you're doing direct response, I would say that, I don't know, you know, this is like, I always think about like the worst offers to me are like those ClickBank offers, right? Where they're like, you know, they're just so like, I saw one the other day, I was studying the video sales letter, and it was like, oh, you can take this pill and this person lost 20 pounds in a month. And I'm like, oh, that's such horseshit. So I think that you have to have direct response and yes, selling hard, but, you know, ethically and morally right. That like pitching people
Yeah.
crap that, you know, it doesn't have a chance in selling, which a lot of people do that.
This kind of reminds me, tell me if you agree with this analogy or not, but like, you know, a lot of people have a job and they have to keep their job to pay the
Yeah.
bills, but they want to do, you know, what they love. So they're kind of stuck in that, kind of doing both at the same time. When I listened to the Hormozy talk about, you know, being a direct response person versus a brand builder, I almost saw that same dichotomy where it's like, man, I got to do this direct response shit, you know, because I got to make 20 grand a month to pay my bills. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I'd love to have a YouTube channel with 1 million subscribers, and I could
Yeah.
essentially just put value out there and never really ask for anything. And so, is that how to look at it? Like, if someone's
Yeah.
getting into the
100%.
education business and they're a beginner, should they have like a branding play and then like a more direct response play that's going to pay the bills in the short term?
I mean, I think, because the thing I think about when you mentioned that, there's a couple guys that I know that have a big YouTube following, and so they don't have to sell that hard. They don't have to sell that hard, and they're doing things that a direct response marketer would look at and say, "Oh, you're leaving so much money on the table," but they don't have to, right? Because they have a warm audience, and they don't resonate with that particular style of marketing. So I think that that's what I see, right? The bigger the audience, the less you have to do that, right? So like when Hormozy, if he doesn't ask, he's built up, you know, he has such a big audience that he doesn't have to sell hard. He doesn't have to sell hard in order to do that. I think in the beginning, I think part of the branding, like if you think about branding, let's say if we could categorize branding as content, right? That you're branding through content.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the beginning journey, I think it's good for you to do the content, even if you don't have branding in mind, because that starts to develop your voice and who you are in the marketplace. Because as you start developing content, the person that develops content, you know, day one versus day 365 is different, right? Because you now changing, right? So I think that the whole brand building is, I think, like I feel that I have a brand that I developed because of reputation and longevity. But and then the whole YouTube thing and everything else helps that. And it helps people come to me that already I have a built-in trust with them. Now, my goal is I'd love to make that audience bigger, and that's what I'm trying to do now. But I can certainly see it because, like, for example, a good example is this. When people come in through my YouTube channel, we were sending them to the same funnel that we send cold traffic. And there were people, you could tell they were aggravated. They're like, why do I have to watch the webinar? What's the product that Chico sells? Like, that's what they want to know. Like, that's a perfect example of somebody who's already, like, you build up that brand to where they already want to work with you. You don't have to sell them. Mm-hmm. So as you build up the brand, then you can change your tactics because now you have warm people that you have to work with. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. So it's almost like if I went in for like a business handshake with my own brother, like, and he's like, what are you doing this? Why don't you give me a hug?
What are you doing?
Like, we already know each other. Why are you being so formal? So your audience was feeling like I'm already kind of ready. Like, I don't need this. I don't need.
They're like, why do I have to sit through a webinar, Chico? Come on. Well, I thought you had like, I want to buy, I'm interested in buying this thing that you have. Can I just get the link so I could see like what the details are? So
That's
you know
awesome.
that we get that, and so it's interesting reading those comments because it makes you realize that, oh, they're coming from a different place than somebody coming in from the cold.
Yeah. And it sounds like you love YouTube and you think YouTube's a great place for somebody to start to build that relationship with their audience. Will you talk about YouTube a little bit, what you like about it so much?
Yeah, I think the things that I hate about it is that it's so hard. I think YouTube is very difficult. At least it's. I'll say I'll break it down a couple of different. Why is it that I think YouTube is a great platform to start with? I think it's because number one, you know, everything is going video. Number one. Number two, it's an easy play for you to create derivative content, right? Because if you do the YouTube video, you could extract from that and create a podcast. You can pay somebody to slice up and create shorts and the reels and put some stuff on TikTok. So from one piece of content, there's a lot of people out there would take that one piece of content and distribute it through all the social media platforms. Secondly, YouTube has longevity. There's videos that I have that I made years ago that are still getting views. People are still watching them and still coming to me. You know, when you post something on TikTok, on all those platforms, you know, you can't find anything. If I want to see like, oh man, I remember that, you know, Brian had this amazing post 6 months ago on TikTok or on IG, good luck in finding it, right?
Can't find it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't find it. Yeah. I also think that YouTube develops a much different relationship than the short form content. Short form content tends to be more edgy, more like just catching attention versus if you get somebody on YouTube and they've watched, you know, 8 videos and, you know, and think about the number of hours that they watch of you. And I look at it this way. I heard one time from Ty Lopez. And he was like, you know, you have to think about it in terms of how many hours does somebody need with you in order for them to feel comfortable. Like if you think about it that way, then you think about, okay, how many YouTube videos would they need to watch, right? And maybe I might have a webinar that they watch for an hour, and then I send them to YouTube, and then, you know, before they buy, they might watch 5 or 6 hours of content, and now they feel like, oh, okay, I think I get what Chico's about. I think I trust him and I jive with him, and so then now they're ready to make a buying decision. So I'm a big fan of YouTube. Also, YouTube, I think, has great discovery. I don't know how many times I've like podcasts. If I go on podcasts and I'm trying to find somebody's podcast deliberately, I have to like make all these searches just to be able to find something. They can't find a podcast. So from a discovery, you know, YouTube is great. So I mean, and you know, to me, I think YouTube is a great platform. I find it's a very frustrating platform because you know, like right now we're stuck. I'm kind of stuck at 15,600 subscribers, and then you kind of look and see people that are having amazing success and really quickly skyrocketing, but yet you're kind of sitting still. And so it is coming to terms with the content that you believe is amazing content isn't really that great at all, right? Because on YouTube, I could watch a video that you did, and you got 100,000 views on that video, and you did that video 2 years ago, and I'm like, oh, I should do a video. I'll get the same amount of views. But that video was good for the time that when you published it, because now everybody else has published similar videos. And so now that content doesn't have any newness to it or anything unique. I think that when we look at Hormozy, I think that the thing with Hormozy, I think that this is my opinion, is that he's offering unique advice that it's hard to find somewhere else on YouTube. Because if you think about it, he's a guy that's making, you know, his company is doing 85 million. So you're not learning from somebody who's, oh, I made 6 figures or I made 7 figures. Like this is a significant amount of money. He has a different perspective that's different than the other guy. So he stands out as somebody unique. At least that's the way I see it. And so it is frustrating, but and I've gotten coaching, and I just recorded a video today, and I want to crack that YouTube nut. But it does bring us good customers that know, like, and trust me, and that believe in what we do, and they're great people to work with, and they know me. Like, it's weird. You go to an event, they're like, yeah, I know who you are. Like, whenever I go to seminars, I always introduce myself to everybody as if like nobody knows me, and they're like, I know who you are. Watch your YouTube videos.
Interesting. Well, if it's helpful for you, I actually discovered Hormozy's stuff after reading his book. I didn't know he published any content anywhere online.
Oh,
and
interesting.
then I was recommended his 100 Million Offers book, and I read that and I loved it. And then I all of a sudden found, oh, he has a podcast. Oh, he has a YouTube channel. And, you know, and he mentioned he sold, you know, close to 100,000 copies of that book. So I wonder how many of those people, you know, were first book readers and then became
Yeah.
subscribers to his channel. I have no idea. I'm just one person. But
I think so. I think he developed Goodwill with his content, and then that has fueled. But I think also the book is a great example of a great piece of content at a very, like, it's 1,000 times the value of what he's charging for it. So there's that. You look at, he mentions this, like, people are passing that around because they genuinely believe that they're helping their friends by sharing that book.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's got. So I think he's done a great job with that. The other thing I was going to mention about YouTube is that if you notice, a lot of the podcasts now are video podcasts that then get created as a regular podcast. I'm starting to see that trend now, where, like, I hardly ever listen to podcasts on my podcast app. I just subscribe to their channel and I see their YouTube video, and that has the whole entire podcast, but I'm able to see it visually. So I think I also see that trend as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Man, well, we've covered a lot. I don't want to keep you for too long. I think we could probably talk about this every day for an hour for the next 300 days, and we wouldn't really unpack the subject. But is there anything, like, final words of wisdom that you would give to someone who's new or trying to make their first 6 figures in the education business?
Yeah, I want to talk about a couple of things just real quick. One thing I want to cover, because I made a comment about this, is imposter syndrome, because a lot of people suffer from that. And a friend of mine gave me a good frame around that, and it stuck with me. He said, and hopefully I'm not butchering it, he says, imposter syndrome is just a sign that you're pushing up against your upper limits, right? So in other words, as you're striving to achieve more and do bigger and better things, you're always going to be hitting that upper limit. And the minute you hit that upper limit, that's when imposter syndrome shows up. And so I think of it, when you think about it from that term, then you think of it different. Much like if I said, hey, if you have a problem, I can label that as a problem or an obstacle. But if I say, hey, you have an obstacle to overcome, you have a problem to overcome. But if I say, hey, you have a challenge that you need to push through, it puts a different perspective in your mind, right? Because a challenge is something that you're going to go after and you're going to overcome, etc., versus a problem is something that blocks you. So I think that, to me, might be helpful for people to think of it that way, that it's okay that we all suffer through that, no matter who you are or what you're doing, and it's just a sign that you're pushing to your upper limits, and you just need to be mindful of that and frame it around that. And then
Love it.
The other thing is, just another piece of advice that I would give people, and I'm giving you advice that I suffer myself. And one of them is the fact that at the end of the day, you have to. I've been guilty of ingesting too much information, and then you got caught up in this information overload, and you can't make a decision about something, right? Because whatever decision you make, then next week somebody else shows up in your feed. And at some point, you have to. Great success is only achieved through creating your own path, right? Like, if you think about what I've done, is I had training and I've learned from other real estate investors, but I forged my own path, right? And I did my own thing, which created the success I have. And so, success comes in iteration, not a prescription, right? A lot of people, this guy that I follow online, he talks about prescription, which is how to. Which is everybody's looking for the how-to. Okay, show me exactly how to do this, this, and this. And if you're looking for prescriptions, and if something doesn't work out of the gate, then you think, that doesn't work, that's flawed. And to just be mindful of iterations. And the last thing I will say, this is from a friend of mine, Rich Sheffrin, which I thought, which has always stuck with me, because I've been thinking about this, is that when you're designing your business, a lot of times people make the mistake of trying to change themselves so that their business could progress in the way that they want to. So let's say that if you're a particular way, you're like, I got to change myself because I'm the one that's preventing my business. And the problem with that is that changing yourself is always an enormous obstacle, right? That is very difficult. And so then, rather than doing that, better to mold your business around the way you like to work. So the example for me was that, hey, if I can motivate myself, and Chico, you got to motivate yourself. You got to change your mindset around the fact that you to be on the phone with people and have sales conversations and all that. And that's a long road. Or I can say, well, how can I circumvent that? Well, I can circumvent that because I'm really great at funnels and I can create a webinar and I can put all these things together and I enjoy it. So rather, I'm going to create my business and craft it around. So then that way it works around that and not something that is again, an unnecessary obstacle in the success of my business.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And I've had this, thought with myself recently. And the one thing that, I can't commit to is like staying in the same niche forever. And so, my thought lately has been like, how could I set my business up so that I don't have to do that, so that I can actually, share the things that I'm currently interested in, currently working on.
Right.
And so I'm, working through how I'm going to do that. Like I have some ideas about creating, because like, when I coached in real estate for 5 or 6 years, I never wrote a really good book or created a really good course that I could, continue to sell once my interests moved on.
Right.
So basically, once my interests moved on, everything I'd worked for kind of died. And so I'm realizing I'm gonna have to leave some things in my path if I'm going to be able to build a business that, allows for that changing interest kind of part of my personality. And so it's definitely it's a challenge to get this right.
Yeah. The other thing, the other thing that I have struggled with over the last couple of years is that, thinking through evergreen course versus, I call it like ninja tactics. So recently, like my main thing has been teaching real estate investors how to use Facebook ads. And, Facebook changes at a whim. Things just, you wake up one morning, you're like, oh my God, all hell is breaking loose now. And I got to change the course. I got to you know how many times I've re-recorded my damn course?
Yeah.
But yet, like, for example, somebody told me, like, I don't know if you know this, but fortune builders, they were in the education business. And then now they're not really in the education business. What they were doing is that, and Fortune Builders is just a company that was teaching real estate people how to get started with real estate investing, doing the seminars at the hotels and stuff like that. And then now they own like $1.1 billion worth of assets, like some ridiculous amount. Because what they were doing is that they were in the background, they were buying real estate and using their students to fund the real estate, et cetera. But one thing that came up at the call that I was on recently is that their wholesaling course never changed for 8 years. Like, and something to think about, because then, if you're, in our business is eliminating the things that need to change so often, right? So if you so be mindful of this. So if you're going to create a course and the course is about how to be a ninja on Instagram or on TikTok, know that you're setting yourself up for continually updating that course and changing it, everything else, versus, a more evergreen. And so you can take that approach with your course. So you can create, and when you're creating your course, maybe separate it between evergreen content, big concepts that are not going to change. And then you might have some platform specific stuff that then might change, but then now you're not having to recreate the whole entire course because of that. That's something that I've fallen victim to, because my stuff is very tactical and very timely, but that also creates a lot of work. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because it came to my mind as we were talking. Yeah.
I'm sure you've read Russell Brunson's books, and he talks in those books a lot about wanting to make sure that, he mainly talks about evergreen stuff. And I think in his last book, Traffic Secrets, he does go into, this is how we, create YouTube thumbnails. This is the current trend, but he keeps saying in there, watch the Dream 100 in your niche, and whatever they're doing, do that, on the platform, because that's what the platform is rewarding, versus, what this book says to do, because the book's going to age. So yeah,
and
that's
the
interesting.
The other thing is avatar, right? So let's say in the real estate niche, if I'm talking to somebody that has already in the niche, that is already experienced, then by its nature, then the what I sell them has to be cutting edge, has to be different than everything else, right? Versus if I'm selling now somebody who is just getting into real estate, they just need the basics. So an example, Fortune Builders, they were teaching people that were just brand new in the business. So their content was evergreen also because of the nature of their avatar that they were serving, that didn't require ninja stuff. They just required basic stuff because they were at ground zero, not at like what I'm dealing with is I'm dealing with people that I got to be better than anything else they got going on.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any products or programs or courses like for anyone that's listening to this who wants to learn more, that about, and growing an education business? Do you offer anything, or is there anywhere they could go to learn more?
I don't. It's funny because it's something that I've been thinking about, but I haven't decided on that. My real estate channel, I would probably say for anybody who's interested, they can subscribe to my real estate channel. That one is catered to a real estate. I was contemplating creating another channel that's going to be more broader topics, but I haven't come to that. It's funny because it seems so overwhelming, and mind you, like I'm already experienced, right, in the info business, but I'm no real estate. But then now to go in and then, take all the concepts that I have in my head and everything else, and then now translate them into a whole nother niche and a whole nother avatar, that's a very formidable task. So for
Yeah.
those of you starting new, just think of the fact that it isn't an easy endeavor, right? I would say don't underestimate the task at hand. But I feel like I do. But I'm still stuck on that. You and I had a conversation about that because I flounder. It depends on the month. And I think that's something for everybody's benefit. That's something that I believe holds me back, right, from doing other things that I want to be doing. That holds me back because indecision is a horrible thing, right? So for right now, I'm just focusing on the niche, and then trying to the big thing that I'm trying to figure out, and this is what I may be helpful for everybody here, is I'm trying to figure out how I can get away from teaching the ninja stuff, right? And because what happens is, like with the Facebook stuff, I'm the one that has to figure it out. So recently I've been digging into TikTok, right? And so I'm digging into TikTok in order to learn TikTok ads, in order to maybe potentially create a course. But now I'm being the mechanic in there. I'm going in there and figuring all that stuff out. And that has limited utility because at some point, as the platform changes, whatever I publish now might be different 6 months ago. So it's very quickly. And I was thinking about the fact that, hey, there's people in our niche, that, like say, for example, that do have an info business, but they do more real estate, and they may have $20 million in real estate, and they barely know how to open up Facebook Ads Manager or TikTok Ads Manager or none of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, the decision I'm trying to make is that where can I put effort into where I can get a disproportionate amount of results back without being the technician inside of those things. So that's the problem that I'm currently trying to solve. And so because I don't want to start something else, because I think that if I have this problem now in my current business, I'll take that same problem to whatever else I'm doing. And so I'll just continue to have the same problem.
That's smart. And I think that one thing that could be challenging is that, I'm in Alaric Heck's YouTube Ads Mastermind. I think I mentioned that to you. And, big reason I paid 20 grand or whatever it was to work with them was because I needed somebody to show me how to work YouTube ads and all that complicated shit on the platform. And they're always having to say, hey, we just updated the training. We just updated the course. YouTube just switched from, just responsive to discovery plus, and now we're doing this new thing. And let's say, they had a more evergreen course that was just like marketing in general, like we'll teach you how to improve your marketing, and it was time tested truths. I may have bought that, but I don't know if I would have paid 20 grand for it, right? So it's like the ninja stuff I think is easier to sell because it's technical and like people want you to walk them through. So maybe there's the rub, is like when you try to create the evergreen things, it's you're almost broadening your niche in a way, or you're kind of stepping back from the specifics. You think that's true?
I think so, because I don't want to say who they are, but there's some people in our niche, in the real estate niche, that have developed a pretty good, significant, and I was thinking about this, a significant following on YouTube, a couple 100,000 subscribers plus. And thinking through like what they teach isn't rocket science. It's not anything like, oh my God, I have never heard this shit before. Like, no, it's like rudimentary stuff. But their ability to sell it, right, is there because of the audience that they create. So they don't have to learn any of the stuff that I'm trying to learn. So that's the thing that I was actually looking at a couple of things that I wrote to myself, is that figuring out, this is what I was thinking, is what are the 2 or 3 things? Because right now, if I think about it, and I'm naturally this way, like I like to tinker. So I'm like, I want to learn how to do YouTube ads, and I want to learn how to do, TikTok and everything else. And so then finding what I think there's value in understanding the platform. So for example, maybe I can go through the TikTok course that I have and go through it really quickly, just to have a better understanding of it, how it works, right? So that way, if I talk to somebody, I can have a reasonable conversation with you, just the same way that you're doing with the YouTube stuff. But is it really a good idea for me to be the doer of that thing? And now more, that's my contemplation, is that you can find somebody through Upwork, through these platforms, that they could be the person that implements that. But hey, what are the 2 or 3 things that you can focus on that then are the big rocks that then you can derive the revenue and then use that to fund back the business to then get the other parts done. So that's the thing that I've been thinking about, because that YouTube thing is a rabbit hole, because it doesn't, it changes every, Google's now going through a bunch of changes. They change a bunch of the targeting and everything else. And that's a whole nother world, that's a whole task.
Well, let me ask you this, since I feel like this would be helpful for people, and it sounds like you're pondering your next move. And we talked about, everyone's new favorite online man crush earlier, Alex Hormozy.
Yeah.
Just watching his growth, could you do something like that too, where you just put a video out every day about whatever the hell you want to, and create different playlists and categories on your YouTube channel? So you still have real estate, and then you have everything. You have an online education playlist, and just as a pure branding play, and basically do what he's doing. Because if you go in his channel, he has playlists and sales, business, mindset, like different categories, and all of this stuff he talks about is evergreen too. There's no really ninja, click this button, follow this 37-step formula. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Like, what do you think would happen if you followed a similar approach to that?
Well, I mean, I had a consultation with Daryl Eves and I forgot who it is, somebody else, and what the challenge. So, like, if I think about my channel, if I think about the audience that I have is a wholesaling niche, and so in order to get attention, I can't do how to find a cash buyer video, and how to, like, the rudimentary stuff that now a lot of other videos are there. So it has to be something different. So then, like, for example, my channel, I find that if I tap into current news and current events, then that brings in more views, right? So it has to be, like, my opinion is, it has to be an expansion of the topics, because right now the niche that I'm in, the wholesaling niche, has its, like, for example, if I'm looking for the top videos, the top video on wholesaling may have 100,000 views, but another niche, the top video on that niche, may have 2 million views. So I'm working with a much smaller pie. So I think for me, the thing would be to increase into broader topics. So I wouldn't be talking about wholesaling, I'd be talking about real estate, the impact of the economy, and those bigger picture things. My concern with, and then I would have to maybe decide if I wanted to pivot, right? So for example, like, I'll give you an example. One topic that I noticed, and I'm 50 years old. So one of the things that I was thinking about is, like, my God, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So I noticed on YouTube, I created this. This is a tip for people on YouTube. So let's say that you have a particular topic, right? That you want to know what the videos are that are being published, etc. So don't use your account, because your account is clouded by all the stuff that you watch. You watch Hormozy, but your prospect doesn't watch Hormozy. Go in and set up a brand new Gmail account and a brand new Gmail profile, YouTube profile, and then go and look for, like, 1 or 2 videos of the people that are in the niche you want to be in. Watch those videos, take the first one, watch it all the way through. It'll show up another one, watch the second one, and then leave it and come back in a couple of days. When you come back in a couple of days, then go start browsing through the homepage on YouTube. And all of a sudden, all the different, because you have to think about it, I'm not competing against wholesaling videos. I'm competing against the wholesaling video, the cap video, and all these other things that they're seeing, right? because it's a viewer experience. And so when you do that and you look at the homepage, now you're really going to have a grasp of everything that's fighting for attention in that whole arena. And that'll give you more, so for example, I recently noticed, oh, wow, there's these videos of people talking about, oh, I'm 50 years old. What should you do if you're 50 years old and you're lost? What do you do if you're 40 years old and you're lost? And, thinking about like, oh, okay, I could relate to some of those videos, but then I don't know if whether or not that would be too far off from my channel, right? Because my channel is really about real estate. And so Graham Stefan has done this where he's taking and he's created all these different channels based on, what different interests, right? So he doesn't want his main channel is a finance channel. Then he has these other channels, right, that he covers different topics. So that's kind of what I was thinking about doing, keeping my channel just real estate specific, try to broaden the topics to bring in more people. I do have a couple people on my team that are willing to do videos for the channel. So now it introduces a different voice because I'm a 50-year-old bald guy. If you're a 25-year-old young guy, you may not resonate with me. But if I got Gene on my team who can do some great videos, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, who's this guy, Gene? I could resonate with him, but it's under the same umbrella. That's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to do with the real estate channel over the course of the next 30 or 60 days, broadening the topic. And then if that goes well, I'll continue to do that. And maybe I'll scratch my itch about other topics in another channel by itself.
Awesome. Well, you said you hadn't talked about this topic before on an interview.
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed the last hour of getting to talk about, something else that you're passionate about?
Well, it's interesting because you forget how much you know. So as you ask me these questions and I tell you my answers, I'm like, oh yeah, like I just internally, I'm like, okay, it sounds like you know what you're talking about, right? But you don't say that because you're just so caught up in your head, right? And I actually think that I know more about this business than I do about the real estate business, right?
Yeah.
There's guys that can run around circles around me. I think I'm more of in the real estate niche. I think I'm really good at lead generation. That's what has been my forte. And I don't pretend to be somebody else. Like if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to learn how to do mobile homes or something, I'm like, I don't know anything about that. I got to go find somebody else to teach you that. So I stay in my lane. But I think it's just, I feel like I definitely know more about this after you and I talking, at least. Or you might say, Chico, you're wrong. You're like a big idiot.
Oh, no, you're definitely someone I'm looking up to and following. And as you started to unpack, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy knows so much. What tidbits can we run with, because we could do a 10-part series. And
we could do a 10-part series.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is just want to make this comment about Hormozy, because I find it interesting where like it's easy to look at a guy like him and feel really bad about yourself because he's like, oh my God, look at that guy. And then he's a smart guy. Can't take it away from him. But he also had timing and opportunity. Because if you think about it, he started and he says this in one of his older videos. Nobody was doing gym type of info products. Nobody had a product like that, right? So like he was one of the few gurus. Facebook was cheap. And then the other thing that he has that I can't replicate in my business is the cycle upon which the money for the customer replenishes was super fast, meaning that he sold a $16,000 product. He said in one of his YouTube videos, and I made a note of it because I thought it was interesting, that that they made the first payment. I think they made $2,000 down, and then it became like after a couple of weeks, it was like $1,000 a week for like 16 weeks. So it was like $16,000. By the time they made their third payment, they had already recouped all the money and were like really profitable. So it was so easy to just, and it made me think, because it's like, how could you reverse engineer your business? Because if you engineer your business so that your customer gets their result really quick, now they're paying you from their profits. That's why it grew so fast. I think is because of the fact that now, like, oh, it's free money. Like, you made me all this money, of course I'll pay you $1,000. Like with real estate, it's a 90-day cycle. By the time you get your first deal and you got to do all this marketing and you have to make all these calls, like you got this long, path that you have to. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit I picked up from one of his videos.
Yeah, he had a starving audience and he had a no-brainer offer. And another thing that happened with him is I actually knew about him because I went to some Russell Brunson events. I went to ClickFunnels headquarters for a few days and like learned how to build webinars with Russell. It was pretty cool. But Alex Hormozy was already in Russell's inner circle. Like the
Right.
Joe McCall was in it too. Maybe he still is. I don't know. But Alex, in one of his videos or somewhere, he says that he went to that inner circle meeting and he told Russ, and at that time
Yeah.
he was just building his own gyms. And he told Russell, I've got 10 gyms opening in the next 3 months. Then I got 5 more locations picked out. And Russell said, dude, this business model is stupid. Like, you don't need to be opening up your own
Yeah.
gyms. You need to teach other people how to open up gyms. And so
Yeah.
that one conversation shifted his strategy
Yeah.
entirely. And so, he's been a smart guy and he's had smart mentors and he had, a great niche. And yeah, like, it's interesting. I guess, yeah, like you said, you look at him and you're just like, man, like, why can't I can't, get more than 10 views on my freaking YouTube videos. And this guy's getting a
Yeah.
5,000 new subscribers a day on YouTube or whatever. I guess some people have, kind of catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
On top of being really smart and in the right place at the right time and working their ass off,
Yeah.
So I guess comparing yourself to people can be a bit defeating if you do that too much, right?
I did. I actually, I barely go on TikTok. I don't know how people watch TikTok. I really don't. I after about 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, this is like a whole complete waste of time.
15 seconds.
Then,
yeah.
Yeah. And then Instagram, I don't go on Instagram that often. It makes me feel bad about myself because everybody's telling their best version of their life. And you don't never see, like, it's always front stage. You don't know what's going on behind somebody's, I'm going to read with the context. There was a mastermind that happened. And then somebody came and presented at that mastermind, and then and they were presenting about this tactic that they were using, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, that was amazing!" And then like a month later, they filed for bankruptcy. So like the story that they presented wasn't the case. So I think that I think for me, Instagram becomes a good place for me to visit if I want to feel bad about myself. So I try not to visit. I don't even.
Yeah.
I have somebody on my team check DMs. The only place I go to is probably more than I should is YouTube. But I'm a student of YouTube. Like, I'm watching these videos and I'm, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
it's part of like my thing that I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I remember watching one of your YouTube videos from a few years ago. I won't be able to tell you which one it was, but it was really funny. Like, you were talking about probably real estate, but there was all this humor mixed in, and you were just talking about like goofy stuff you were doing or something to do with your coffee, or I don't know, but it was just like making me laugh over and over. And I just remember, like, how Hormozy has his thing where he's just like sitting there with a tank top and a breathe right strip on his nose and doesn't give a shit, Well, I could tell you kind of had your, your angle too, but it was authentic. It was just you being you, probably your typical day bouncing around the house, working, doing your different stuff. And I think people would dig. I know I would like, just a more sort of behind the scenes look at like Cris Chico's life and what you're thinking about today. And, I would totally watch that channel. So
that's interesting. I had a conversation. You know who Alex Pardo is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's
He switched from. He pivoted from real estate. Yeah.
Now he's doing storage, and he just has. But I had a conversation with him because he, one of the conversations I was telling him about a conversation that he wants to talk about other topics. And I said, you want to take people on your journey, what you're doing, like the struggles that you're having. And then he's like, oh, I just did that in this podcast episode. And I'm like, really? He says, yeah, I listened to it. So I listened to the podcast episode, and I'm like, look, and I sent him a message. I said, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being like, oh man, you put everything out. And a 1 meaning like that was very superficial. I said, you think it's a 10? That was like a 3. And I remember I had training. I joined a program a bit ago from this guy named Hank Norman. Hank Norman is a media guy, and he's the guy that helped. He worked with like Mel Robbins, and he worked with. He's a good friend with Grant Cardone, and helped Grant Cardone. And one of the things that he told me that he was always pushing for Grant Cardone is to reveal more about like all like to peel the onion and to really share with people like the ugly stuff. And then little by little he chipped away at that. And then Grant started to talk more about his drug addiction and all the messes that he had in his life. And and it's funny because I think that that's when I became a fan of his, when I started to understand, like, oh wow, that's really rough. And so I think that and so Hank's message to me, and there was one video that I did in my YouTube channel. You can look at, I think it's like how to reinvent yourself. And I did that video for him, and he says that video is the direction you need to go on, because people, it's like you want to take people on a journey, but it's like a movie. They have to feel like they're tied in to you and what you're doing and your success. But the way you do that, if you think about any movie and any character in the movie, it's like, you have that hero, but you have that guy that, his life is a mess and he's doing all these struggles, and now you can relate to them, and like you're in that whole emotional state. And so when you say that, that's one of the discussions that I had with Pardo, but that's one of the things that I'm discussing about me, because I teach about real estate, but there's other stuff happening in the background, right? And that's when I was thinking about those videos about, hey, what do you do if you feel 50? If you're 50 years old and you feel stuck, because I feel stuck, even, and like we all do, we all are stuck in our particular place of where we want to go next. And there's all these inhibitions and these ways that we think that prevent us, and we're struggle with that. And so to me, it was an experiment of, hey, maybe I might do a channel just talking about that. And not, and yeah, there's other businesses stuff going around, but and so anyway, it's funny you mentioned that, because those are some of the things that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, something that helped me recently, I was reading in Russell's book, he quotes Gary Vee about content creation. And Gary Vee's saying, everybody thinks they got to get on social media and be like, this is what you need to do, and these are the 3 tips to blah, 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 blah. And he said, instead of doing that, what you need to do is just document what you're already doing, document your journey. And then there's that subtle shift between like, how like your friend, you don't want your friend to just tell you, Chris, this is what you need to do. You want them to say, hey, here's what worked for me. Yeah. And so it's softer that way. And so that's what I've been doing over the past month or so, is I'm just like, well, shit, right now I'm editing a book, and I found a guy on Upwork who's helping me do that. I'm just going to do a screen share and show what it's like to have an editor go through your thing and put 110 suggestions in your Google Doc, and you go through and check them or X them. And this day I'm building my course on Kajabi. I'm just going to show what I'm doing, or this is how I like make my coffee in the morning. And I feel like, this helps me. And it is interesting when you start to think about, I actually have a client right now who she helps women get out of like domestic abuse situations. And she's like, I did my first Facebook Live and it was so hard. It took me 2 hours to plan. And I just don't know if I could do that every day. Because I was like, you need to publish as much as you can. I was like, well, what are you already doing? That your audience, like you're parenting, you got kids. And so you could show what it's like a day in your life of parenting. You go to Taekwondo. She's a black belt in Taekwondo. It's like you could show, yourself at that class, doing something that's making you stronger after getting out of that situation. So we're all like doing so much shit every day that it creates an infinite amount of content that we can make, but it's also just authentic, and it lets people into the story. And the positioning is like, here's what I'm doing, not here's what you should do. So that shift has helped me a lot just over the past month. I feel like if anyone's listening, that might be able to help them out with their content.
Yeah. The thing I think about is what's the part, what is the part that I'm most afraid to reveal about myself? Because that's that's what Hank was. What's the part that you're afraid that people will judge you if they knew those things about you and the trials and tribulations? And he says that's where the gold is, but that's also what's the hardest onion to peel. Yeah.
So. Well, dude, I think that's a good stopping point. Thanks for going over today. I'm going to link to your YouTube channel in the description so people can check that out. Anything else you want to say, or anywhere else you want to point people to before we hop off today?
No, just YouTube is great. Just if you want, check out my content, etc., on YouTube. And that's it. And I just leave it with the whole imposter syndrome. Hey, remember, if you feel imposter syndrome, it's just you're hitting up against your upper limit, and it's just, you have to keep that in mind, that you're always going to feel that as you're hitting your upper limit.
That's beautiful. Perfect, Danny. Thank you for your time today, Chris.
No problem. Thank you, buddy.
All right. I'll see you guys next time.